Hello, and welcome to another episode of Blurbal Reasoning, where today we are going to be talking about Path of Daggers by Robert Jordan, the 8th book in the Wheel of Time. It took me 5 months to read the previous book in the series, A Crown of Swords. It took me 10 months to read A Path of Daggers. Much like in the previous video, this means I will be relying on my notes and a hefty synopsis of a book to guide me along my way, to remind me of the events which have taken place, because these are long books and my attention span is short. So if I leave out any small details, I do apologise. So let's talk a little bit about why this book took me 10 months to read. And that is because, as I've heard many people say before I reached this book, this is the book where the pacing slows to a crawl. And I actually want to push back against that a little bit, even though it did take me 10 months to read this book due to that very reason. I think the opening to this book is a slog. The first 7 or 8 chapters are what drew me away. And that's because, if I remember right, those chapters mostly focus on Elaine and Nynaeve and the Bowl of the Winds and fixing the weather. But it goes on for so long, with so many D-tier characters talking about their relationships to each other, so many named Aes Sedai who I'm never going to remember, and how they hate each other because they're from different Udgers, and how they treat Elaine and Nynaeve, and the balance of power between them and the kin, and ages versus powers, and tower law versus human emotion. And it goes on like that for chapters, and not much happens. And it's excruciating. But once you get past that, there is a brilliant book to be found, with a nice big handful of Rand chapters, which I enjoyed greatly, with some Perrin chapters, which I had mixed feelings about, with some Egwene chapters, which I greatly enjoyed. Mat is notably absent, and from what I remember from previous books, that's probably a saving grace of A Path of Daggers. Now, towards the end of this book, the Elaine, Nynaeve, and Avienda plotline does become more interesting, because there is a murder that takes place within their group of Aes Sedai, and also they reach Caemlyn, and Elaine finally, well, she doesn't claim the throne. She puts in a claim for the throne. That's probably going to be most of book 8, or 9, sorry. We've just read book 8, good lord. But yes, stuff did finally happen at the end of this book for that group of people, but it took a while. I mean, stuff happened at the beginning, obviously, with them fixing the weather, but still, you know what I mean. Perrin's whole deal in this book is that he is heading to Galdeen to stop Masema, the prophet, from bringing up a bunch of unruly people, calling themselves Dragonsworn, and doing a bunch of unruly things. At least that is what the synopsis would have you believe. But what Perrin's chapters were really all about in this book was understanding how to handle his wife, which I would like to hear from women who enjoy this series, how these chapters felt to you, because I thought they sounded quite misogynistic, but that's just me. I mean, okay, let's walk that back a bit. I understand what Robert Jordan was going for. He was going for the idea that women from this particular part of the world value strong men, and Perrin not understanding what women value, and being kind of a gentle soul, despite being a strong man as well, did not understand that this is what Fael wanted from him, and was therefore offending her by not showing strength and not arguing back and not shouting at her, and therefore, in her eyes, making it seem like she was not strong enough to be shouted at. And I get it, but it doesn't read well to me. I'm sure I've been complaining about this in all the other verbal reasonings about this book, so I apologise if I sound like a broken record here, but I've found a pretty succinct way to explain what I don't like about the way Robert Jordan writes gender. And it's not the binary nature of gender, because, you know, he wrote this in the 90s and the early 2000s. We weren't really having those discussions yet, that's fine. Not publicly or openly or in lots of circles anyway. Not that I knew of, maybe we were. I was like 5, so I don't know. The succinct way to say what I want to say about it is, he very much seems to subscribe to the notion that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and this feels very outdated, like more outdated than the time that he's writing in. And while Wheel of Time is an epic sprawling fantasy series about lots of things, one of the things that it likes to beat a dead horse about is how men and women are fundamentally different and can never truly understand one another. And I'm not just going to say he's a misogynist, because I don't think he is. I think he does a lot of work where Tolkien, for instance, would never have, to include women and give them prominent personalities and diverse personalities. And I'm just not sure he was necessarily the right voice to write a lot of what he wanted to write regarding that. But then his wife was his editor, so maybe I'm overreaching, because clearly she would have had a lot of say in this too. Yeah, I've done some reading on Robert Jordan. I know that he was a libertarian monarchist. I also know that he was a pretty bloody good writer. Please try to remember, everything I say from a critique angle and not from like a personal attack angle. I do worry about that sometimes, because as much as I have to say about things that I don't agree with the way he's writing, the main thing to take away from this is that we are 8 books deep into a 14-book series of like 700, 800 page long books, and for the most part I'm having a fantastic time. That's the main takeaway. But yeah, at the end of a Perrin portion of this book, we finally get to the damn point, and Perrin goes to see Masema, and we get to see a little bit about how wild and crazy Masema is, which I'm looking forward to exploring more in the next book. One fun subplot of the Perrin and Fael chapters is that Queen Morghese of Andor is part of their party in disguise, which is some dramatic irony that only we reader types know. So her love affair with Talonvor? That proceeds apace. I've noticed with a lot of the romance that Robert Jordan likes to write in this series, a lot of it tends to be powerful women falling for men, having a bit of an identity crisis about it for several chapters and books until anything actually happens. And then after a brief stint of actual romance, it very quickly falls into the men are from Mars, women are from Venus, angry marriage stereotype. Although I do quite like Rand and Min's relationship, I've got to say. There's also a lot of look at how self-assured and powerful this woman is. I'm now going to spend paragraphs dressing her down and having her lose her power and her agency. Like Fael getting kidnapped and rode around naked in the snow at the end of the book. Or the fact that the Ashaman to capture Aes Sedai women have to kiss them, and then they have to bow to every whim of the Ashaman. And I feel like someone in the comments is going to tell me, well, yeah, that's how the magic works. To which I say, yes, that's how the magic was written to work. Anyway. He does Egwene right. Egwene, the Amelin Seat, continues to be the best female character, in my opinion. The best female protagonist of this book series. She's so fun to read. The idea that she was kind of like supposed to be used as a puppet Amelin, and instead she is taking control for herself and having to take control scrap by scrap and making decisions which are going to benefit the world in the long run. I love that. It's so great. The highlight of this book is that we got quite a nice serving of Rand chapters. And I love me some fucking Rand chapters. Man's going mad, man's potentially not going mad, man's got voices in his head, voices are potentially actual people from the past, but they're gonna make him think he's going mad because he doesn't understand why they're there. We've got this burgeoning emperor type who used to be a farm boy, and how's he going to turn into this ruler? And he's got these Ashaman, he's got these different peoples looking to him for leadership, and he's got to respect their traditions. I don't love that stuff so much because it manifests in weird ways sometimes. Like like the Aiel women coming and beating the living shit out of him for not allowing them to come with him into battle, which it makes sense. It was just kind of like, okay, sure, this is just fine, I guess. Anyway, I love the Ashaman subplot so much. Like, the idea that, like, the world's fucked if we don't get more powerful people, So even though the world's going to be fucked if we give these people power, let's give these people power in the short term and hope I can fix it later. And how that's going to start turning into his downfall, maybe. Like at the end of this book when, oh shit, hang on, my notes, what was his name? When Dashiva turns on him. And we don't know if that's because Dashiva's mad or if it's because of Rand's... I mean, we've got a whole thing to talk about with this, but what Rand did in the book, which ended up killing a bunch of his own people. So is the Shiva mad or is he rebelling? We don't know. Anyway, yes, in this book, Rand leads his Ashaman and his various allied forces from the other countries to repel a Shon-Chen invasion of Altara. You know, at the end of the last book when they invaded Ebu Dar, you know, and they kind of spread outwards from there, I was hoping that this would lead to some kind of big conflict, and it did. And it wasn't just a big conflict for the sake of having a big conflict. The entire point of this conflict was to show Rand's ability to fail, alongside his deteriorating mental state, of course. Something that I was thinking about a lot throughout this book was how in earlier books Rand was swearing to himself that he would never channel, and then that he would channel only when necessary. And now we've got this Rand who is channeling as much as he can, because when he lets go of the power, he gets dizzy. And he also gets dizzy when he seizes hold of the power too. We used to have a Rand who was afraid of using Kolandor, the sword that is not a sword, and now we have this Rand who recklessly sends someone else to get it, trusting them to get past his traps and know how to get past his traps to get to the sword, and then uses the sword in a combat situation where he has been advised that it is a tactical disadvantage to rely on the power because, quote, the power feels weird here. And we see it blow up in his face, which is frankly all fascinating stuff. My one nitpick is that when he goes back to Min at the end part of the book after this, he doesn't seem as racked with guilt as I assumed he would be. But then there is a lot of word count dedicated to the idea that he has steeled his heart, and that he is not going to let himself feel things anymore. So maybe that's part of it. But I don't know, Rand from Min's point of view seems a little different to Rand from Rand's point of view in that respect. Now, interestingly, the synopsis I'm refreshing my memory with here says that the disruptions in Sidene were caused by the use of the Bowl of the Winds. That is something I theorized, but I don't think it was ever confirmed. So I don't know if I got a little bit spoiled there in that synopsis, or if that's just a fan theory. But, you know, there's that. Okay. That was the portion of the video where I was looking at a synopsis of the events of a book. Now I was going to go into greater detail by referring to my own path of notes, as I called this document, but I think I need to get better at note-taking. For instance, prologue. Fisher in fantasy chess could have been inspired by a shadow of a memory of Rand. Game is ancient itself. Wheel. Took me a minute to figure out what I'm saying, but I think what I'm saying is that there was a passage about a player piece in a board game, a lot like chess, in a different era, which was based on Rand, but which was the past from where Rand currently is. I remember something like that being the case, but my god, man, add more context to your notes. Chapter 1, the Amayar and their giant orb which will end illusions. I don't... What who are the Amayar? What is this giant orb? I have no memory of this. I spent too long reading this book. Oh, I did note that when Kate Redding is reading Elaine, she injects some haughtiness into her voice that only Michael Kramer had done before. So like the rare times when Michael Kramer gets to give her a voice because it's a male POV chapter in the audiobook, he gave her a really, like from Matt's point of view, he gave her a really haughty air of speaking, which Kate Redding had not done in Elaine's chapters previously, but then started to do in this book. And I think it's really cool how they clearly like take cues from each other. They've also altered pronunciations to match the others before. So there's a fun audiobook tidbit. Oh yeah, we learned that it's dangerous to unweave a weave, and that it is possible to reweave a weave unless it is unwoven. So There's a game of Tetris. Tetris? Never mind. And there is a Forsaken who is perplexed by the act of unweaving. A rare instance of someone from a different era learning something from this era. I think it's Avienda who unweaves, but I could be mistaken. Chapter 3. This plot is at a snail emoji's pace. Okay, so it's mentioned that the kinswomen don't look ageless or old, but that the youngest is older than the oldest Aes Sedai. And my theory for this was that they sever themselves and rebind themselves, like the old Amelin. Come on, you know her name. Swan Sanche. Also, good lord, I just saw on the wiki that Wheel of Time has 2,787 named characters. Are you starting to understand why names escape me and why Aes Sedai politics can become a mire? Now, look, I know that this is the 90s and there's no such thing as gay romance in the 90s, but I am starting to believe that Robert Jordan might legitimately be hinting at a gay romance between Elaine and Avienda, which makes perfect sense considering that they are both supposed to share a husband. Why not also share each other as wives? Like, just the way that Elaine talks about Avienda, not just in terms of like how beautiful she is, but also like emotionally. I think maybe he was aiming at something here, and I would be interested to see if it develops any further. I want to believe the man is going for more than just, and then they all had a orgy, lol. I was going to say a threesome, but come on, don't leave Min out. She's best girl. Oh my god, okay, so this is something I should have mentioned at the very beginning of this video, and if I was more patient, I would go back and edit it in, but I'm not, so you're getting it here. The audible version of Path of Daggers is a bit fucked. I had audio skipping issues, to the point where there are some passages which I straight up did not get to hear. Even more conspicuously, the number of the chapters by the end of the book, within the file itself, was 2 chapters out of sync with the chapters that were getting introduced as the titles. So for instance, the player would say chapter 30 and the name of chapter 30, and it would be introduced as chapter 28 with the same name of the chapter. I don't know how that happened. I don't know if I legitimately missed 2 chapters, or if chapters are just divided up differently between the audiobook and original text. It is concerning. However, Robert Jordan writes so many words about so many D tier characters that I do not know if I missed 2 chapters, and I'm not sure if it's important. Ultimately, I don't think I did. I don't know how that formatting error happened. I don't think I missed chapters, but I definitely missed some passages as it blipped around a few times. Chapter 6. Elaine and the Power of Boom. Thanks, past me. What the hell does that mean? Probably when the portal blew up. It's not called a portal. It's called a gateway? It blew up. And she did that intentionally to stop the Sean Chen from coming through, right? She was trying to unweave the weave so they couldn't reweave it, but she was running out of time. Yeah, okay, I remember now. And then it blew up. Yeah, like, this is some of the problems I ran into. Chapter 7, Perrin on his way to meet Masima. Chapter ended early? Question mark. Also, I'm pretty sure this is where I picked up the book again within the last few weeks. So all that chapter 1 to chapter 7 stuff with Elaine, that was all the stuff that dragged on forever and drew me away from the book. Oh yeah, Elias came sauntering back into the story. Remember him from like the first book, who's teaching Perrin about his wolf powers? He's the one who shows up and tells Perrin how to handle his wife. Cool. The oldest Aes Sedai, whose name also currently escapes me, I'm really good at this, mentions to the oldest wise one that she wants to teach Rand how to laugh again, and that it is dangerous for the fate of a world if he is so dogged in his determination to save the world that his emotional and mental well-being gets to the place where he no longer sees the world as worth saving. And honestly, that's really cool. Also, I've talked about this before, but Rand's madness may be in form of guilt over women dying, which I still think stems from reincarnation-based trauma from Luciferin still being sad about... Oh, fuck. Why did I set up a name I don't remember? Oh, wait, how could I forget? Ilyena. He talks about her enough. Something that props up in this book, and I think it came up in the last book once. I don't quite remember. But Rand seems to have an idea about how to cleanse the taint on Saidin, which would be huge. And I'm trying to think about when this would occur. Like, how close is Rand to madness? Are they trying to get it to a point where he has to force his own hand to try and cleanse the taint on Sidene? I promise I'm not trying to laugh when I say the word taint. Like, is this going to be a book 14 thing or a book 10 thing? Don't tell me. If you spoil anything, I'll block you. Also, I'm pretty sure that whatever his plan is on cleansing the taint, it's going to require using Kalandor. And also, potentially related, I'm pretty sure the reason that Kalandor is flawed is probably because Luz Ferrin used it, and that's when he blew up the world with it, when he committed suicide at the end of his life, which is usually the time when people do that. I don't fucking know, I'm tired. I still find it kind of weird that Luz Ferrin fucks off at one point and then he comes back in this book, and Rand, you know, they play it off as like Rand is like, he was hated that Luz Ferrin was there, and then he was concerned that he was gone, and now he's happy he's back, and then he very quickly gets annoyed with him again. Rand is often joined by Luz Ferrin in his dreams, and at one point they see a blurred face in the mirror in their dream, and they're both very confused. And I think that's whoever the incarnation of the dragon was before Luz Ferrin. Like, I think we're My Hero Academia-ing this shit, and that we're going to start being introduced to previous dragons before Luz Ferrin. That's not really a My Hero Academia spoiler, by the way, don't worry. I mean, it kind of is, but it's very minor. Do forgive me. I wrote down that I enjoy the Forsaken POV chapters when we get them, or I guess passages when we get them, because it's fun to see the world through the eyes of someone who knows a more advanced technology. And so they're like, how do people in this age even get around without being able to transmit information to each other, you know? Like, they still have to fucking use couriers and shit. Someone mentions to Egwene, are you sure you're not Taviran? And that is something that kind of bugs me about these books, that only Rand, Mat, and Perrin are Taviran. I have still yet to see a reason as to why Egwene and Nynaeve couldn't be Taviran, because they very much, maybe not Nynaeve so much, but Egwene very much feels like she should be Taviran. Oh, I really liked the intricacies of Rand's hubris, in how he almost gets killed by the Shonchen. Like, there's moments when he mentions that he can take on the Shonchen all by himself, and that is demonstrably not true. Although thinking about it in retrospect, that might be because he had Kalandor, and he thought, I can do anything with Kalandor. But the fun thing about his hubris is that when he hears from the mouth of an Aes Sedai the rumours about women being his weakness, or dying women being his weakness, it shocks him out of holding the power. It breaks through his void. And what's fun about that is that, like, it's like this version of himself where he thinks he's invincible, that is what stabs through and breaks that, and that very thing is what leads to him almost dying, because he has to re-embrace the power, and he feels sick and dizzy when he tries to, and he fails to, and obviously that's when the assassination attempt takes place. It's a really fun way of showing his hubris. Like, it's not just about fighting capability, it's about who he is as a person that matters. I wrote down that Wireman is sus. I would tell you the chapter, but it could be wrong. But it's mentioned that after a battle, his armor is immaculate, which I think is a very fun way of showing that he's not to be trusted, because he doesn't like to get his hands dirty and that kind of thing. And then later on, we are given a glimpse of him plotting, although I didn't quite catch all the intricacies of that particular passage, because again, it was like D-tier characters and D-tier nouns, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. I'm sure it'll come up later. Somebody mentions that what you gain on the swings, you lose on the roundabouts, and Rand's like, what the hell does that even mean? And I think that's fun because it's an anachronistic phrase, like swings and roundabouts, like from a playground in a modern era, so that clearly could have come from the previous era and just been bastardized down through the years. Chapter 24, or 22, or 26, or whatever the hell chapter it was, the chapter when Rand brings out Kalandor, that is a legitimate oh fuck moment. I was listening to the audiobook at work, in my own free time, and I literally gasped out loud, because it's so built up in earlier books, and there is no hint that he is going to go for Kalandor in this particular moment. Like, as fun as the fight against the Shonchen is, it doesn't feel like an important one, or not as important as later fights will be. So him bringing it out now is a real, like, not just like an oh shit, we're gonna see what he can do with it moment, but like an oh shit, what the hell is he thinking moment, which was really fun. And as previously mentioned, he does not heed the warnings of his Ashaman because he doesn't trust them, and ends up doing an oopsie, pulling an oopsie. Oh, there's a really fun chapter with inside the White Tower with the Aes Sedai channeling like with the oath rod and like questioning each other with the oath rod and making them swear oaths to each other and then revealing that they can unoath each other or themselves, I guess, and they're trying to find who a dark friend is. That entire sequence was fantastic. Just the suspicion and the way that the oath rod ties into it with questioning and how they accidentally find someone who was secretly working for the rebel Aes Sedai, and how they accidentally find someone who is secretly a dark friend, how they kind of like have false suspicions and then blunder into truths, but also the revelation that the oath rod can be used to remove themselves of oaths, which kind of just makes all Aes Sedai sus, because then at any point if they just have free reign to go and grab this oath rod, they could just swear an oath and then later go back on it and no one would know. And that's not something that's ever really taken into consideration by the Aes Sedai in this chapter, and I'm like, you are all meant to be very old and wise, and you are not acting like it, which I think is kind of a point of the Aes Sedai of a White Tower at this point in the series. I also really like how when they ordered Zara to lie, it like almost paradoxed her into death. Like, she started choking because she took an oath not to lie and an oath to lie, so she couldn't do both. When these two Aes Sedai who are using the oath rod to question people are discovered doing this in secret down in the dungeons, someone mentions, you could be pillow friends for all I care, not that it's anyone's business, and I just want to say, gay sex mentioned. Maybe gay stuff really does exist in the 90s, I don't know. I wasn't there, I was 5. Also, yes, if you're rolling your eyes, I am aware that gay stuff was not invented this millennium. Don't worry, it's fine. I'm just doing memes. It's revealed to us that Colindor is flawed, and it enhances your taint. It enhances the Dark One's touch upon the power as you wield it, but apparently it can be safely wielded in conjunction with 2 women guiding the flows, which seems very specific knowledge. I'm sure that'll come up again later. Elaine and Avienda. It's gonna be them. And then, yeah, just being surprised that Shiva's a traitor. That's pretty much all I've got left for you. Well, it's been nearly half an hour. If you're still here, thank you. I'm gonna wrap up this video now because I have the 9th book in the series to start. If you're wondering why this entire video was in a slightly more hushed tone, it's because it's currently 2 in the morning. And I do not live alone. But if you've been waiting 10 months for this Blurbal reasoning, hopefully it lived up to your expectations. If you don't, and you have no idea what's going on, then well done on making it for 26 minutes not knowing what's going on. Please don't hate me for questioning Robert Jordan's opinions on women. I know it will be fine with most of you, but the internet is a scary place. I will see you, hopefully, earlier than 10 months this time. We'll aim for that. How's that sound? We'll meet up again. I'm not going to say within the year, but we'll not wait 10 months again.